got a decent crowd approaching a couple hundred, so we'll go from there and make sure we're ready. We'll be on the lookout for Mr. Yuen. I'll give a couple of updates on, or Dr. Yuen, I'll give a couple of updates on general things, but if he does pop in, we'll just kind of skip straight to our conversation with him, which I'm probably as eager and interested in as you guys are, and then come back to anything else we haven't finished to wrap up. Les, do you want to go ahead and start us with a prayer?
Thank you, Michael. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this day, for this opportunity that you've given us. Lord, we pray for courage to step into that opportunity. We pray for those that are taking care of others in the midst of this virus, or just in the daily lives. And Father, we ask your leadership to be upon those that guide this company, that guide this country, and to be with all of us, staff, agents, and family. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Okay, and gratitudes. If you want to type into the chat box any gratitudes that you might have that you want to share with the group, or obviously, hopefully you've already thought of those things you're grateful for, big and small, this morning when you got up as you follow your daily habits and activities. Be remiss without talking, or at least mentioning, that obviously Saturday is the 4th of July. It's certainly going to be similar to some of the thoughts that I shared on Memorial Day. It's certainly going to be a different 4th of July than we've usually seen, but hopefully it gives us a little bit of time to reflect and appreciate the freedoms that we do have and those things that we have to be so grateful for. Greg Hughes definitely deserves a shout out on that one. Glad to be back home. Glad for his family. Greg had a health issue a little bit and is feeling better than I heard than he's felt in a while. Teresa kept us updated, and we're glad he's doing well. Charles Holiday, I'm thankful for increase of his business and be able to meet the needs of his clients. Absolutely. And then Alex, my son turned 5 on Sunday, so so grateful for his healthy, silly self. That's great. Couple of quick updates on the COVID front. Starting yesterday, we do have mask requirement in common areas of the offices and Salt Point. I know, and I've got to guess I have to do a better job getting a comprehensive list of which cities have ordinances and which don't, and what they apply to and what they don't. I know Mount Pleasant, I think, passed theirs yesterday for grocery stores, pharmacy, and maybe retail workers, but not businesses, not restaurants. I know Somerville passed one last night, and the city of Charleston has theirs in place as well. I think Goose Creek has not had one. The governor is not going to do one on a statewide basis. Kind of leave it to the individual municipalities. Our philosophy is that whatever steps we can take without being too obtrusive and difficult, that still allows people to do business but can help protect ourselves and others. We certainly want to, respect their rights and do whatever we can to hopefully, get us to continue to get through the coronavirus issues, which, will hopefully allow schools to be open in the fall and kids to go back to college and for us to see some sense of normalcy. But I know that's certainly going to take a while. If you guys have questions, thoughts, input on that, obviously let us know. We continue to keep you posted. If we have any issues that are in the offices, obviously we just want to make smart decisions. If somebody thinks they've been exposed or awaiting a test, just, it's probably better to do things on video, stay home, not come into the office, just in case you do get something that you can transmit to somebody else. Again, the issue is not so much what it might do to you or me, or even to the person you might infect, but what, some people will have vulnerable loved ones that they're in contact with, and it's keeping it out of those vulnerable populations right now that seem to be the biggest focus. I assume that's Gary or Cindy. Said thankful for a mother who turned 84 last week. So whenever I put on that mask, I'm thinking about protecting Gary or Cindy's mother, whoever's logged into that computer. I can't tell. Gary's mother, not as so much the other way. So looking at the market, the market continues to be very, very strong. Last week, 481 properties went under contract, making it 8th week in a row of records for our market, which is truly amazing. Back in 2018, the single busiest week that we've ever seen in our marketplace. Now our market's growing, so we're going to continue to see new records, which is great. But back in 2018, the single busiest week ever was 458 contracts. And we've had we got up to one time where we had 539 a few weeks back. So to see 8 continuous weeks of records is truly amazing. We've also seen, even though last week was 481 versus a high point of something like 539, when you compare that to the same week in June in 2019, the growth and the growth for that week has actually maintained pace and even accelerated. So we're seeing year over year growth between 25 and 30% now on a weekly basis off of our lows. So that's a great thing to celebrate. Right now, as of year to date, CTAR is up about 5% in written units over last year. So 2019 was one of the busiest years ever. In the beginning of the year, I sent out a memo saying that 2020 was going to be the best year ever in the history of Charleston real estate. Not necessarily giving up on that, but we didn't need dramatic growth to see that. And at this point, we're up 5% year to date in written contracts. I saw a meme the other day that said, this is 2020, that showed a picture of a flamingo that was flying through some pool and then ran straight into a bridge and just like fell into the water. And I thought that did summarize things pretty well, but the flamingo didn't drown, it got back up and it recovered. And so we're seeing a little bit of that as well. We still do have huge challenges out there with inventory, active listings and pendings. At one point were equal, and I'm not sure whether they're now equal or actually inverted, where there might be more pendings than there are active listings. So scarce inventory is definitely creating issues, challenges, but also opportunities. That is the whole point of the current activity contest, getting you started in those habits and activities that start off your day, but also keep you in touch with those your center of influence. We're really going to focus and talk a lot in the next few weeks and months about annual reviews, being in front of your people, letting them know what's going on in the marketplace, letting them know what's going on in their neighborhood, what's going on even down to their specific street. And if we get in the habit of doing annual reviews with our clients, signing them up for buy side so that they're getting a monthly automatic review from you and not from Zillow. So they're getting something from you saying, here's what's going on in your marketplace, in your neighborhood. And then you're sitting down with them, one-on-one, either in person or over Zoom, and actually talking about what's going on with what's usually their largest single asset. It's amazing the conversation that generates. And as John Brewer was talking about this morning, it's not even so much the conversation it generates with the people you're talking about, but it's the people they're around. So, later when they're talking about the steps their agent takes on an annual basis to talk about their asset and someone else is talking about real estate, then it is really those side conversations, I think maybe even as John Brewer referred to it as, that lead to a lot of the activity that's out there. So we're going to spend a lot of time focused on annual reviews. The activity contest, we're starting week 7 on Thursday, is still going strong. And again, if you look in your individual offices, if you listen at your sales meetings, you'll hear lots and lots of success stories as to things that, agents that are having success based on following those activities and moving forward. So That definitely listings is a challenge and an opportunity. And remember as well, a lot of the public media stories are still talking about closings, are still talking about what we saw in May closings. And even June closings are not going to be great. I mean, June closings will probably be similar to last year if they're positive. They may be down slightly. But it really is that written business in June that's going to be up nearly somewhere between 25 and 30% market wide that really shows what the closings are going to look like in July and the first half of August that tells the tale. So we can always decide, are we going to be dictated by the story, or are we going to be the messenger communicating that story to our clients? And that really gives us some great opportunities. A couple of other things that are interesting out there in the market. New construction now represents 37% of pending contracts, which really is huge. You're talking nearly 4 out of every 10 pending contracts are new construction. So if you're not familiar with the new construction around you, if you're not familiar with the new construction around your listings that you're competing with, if you're not educating your clients about what new construction is out there and what opportunities they have, you're probably missing an opportunity there as well. So, make sure you keep yourself up to go on that. But that traditionally is about 25% of the market. So we've seen a dramatic increase in that. There may also be certainly certain people, new construction houses, obviously many of them are still being built, or they have models. So especially during the downturn, or not the downturn, certainly during some of the virus shutdowns, when people may not have wanted individuals in their house, new construction sales still remained very, very strong. So that kind of gives us an update on the market. We do expect, and some of the things we're going to talk about with Dr. Yun, who should be joining us shortly, really deal with what we're expecting from here. And I think that's important to remember because, I love the fact that we're talking about year over year written contracts increasing over 2019. That's huge. However, we also spent a lot of time during the shutdown talking about the fact that the underlying real estate market was very, very strong, and it was. We had very high demand and very low supply. We also talked about that the underlying Charleston economy was very strong, and it was. Charleston County had unemployment of roughly 1.5%, and the Tri-County area had unemployment of about 2.5%, well below the national average. And one of the reasons why we wanted to have Dr. Young join us today, and I do want to thank Dave Sansom, and I'm sure Michael Sally, and I'm sure some of our people who were engaged on a local, state, and national level, because it was quite an honor for Dr. Young to join us, given his position with the National Association of Realtors. He represents 1.2 million realtors. So him to take, the time to speak to us for a half hour this morning, I think was pretty impressive, and actually not something we thought we could pull off, and I didn't really have a lot to do with that. But the reason we wanted him to be able to talk to us is while we're moving through the market, while we're moving through kind of the shutdown and reopening and moving forward, we are going to see the impacts of the shutdown change that underlying economy. Long-term unemployment will be higher. We will have more challenges and issues that result in those, as a result of the shutdown. And, because of that, it was kind of an appropriate time to have, obviously, the National Association Chief Economist on the call, who I believe is with us. I may not be able to see him, but Les, you've got him. And Dr. Young, are you unmuted?
Yes, good morning, Michael. Thanks for having me this morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. I was just thanking some people in our organization. I think I probably first should have mentioned Rob Woodall as well, who we've got an organization that is very engaged on the state and local and national level. And we were really, really proud that I know you've got a busy schedule, that you would share some time with us. So thank you very much.
Sure, my pleasure. And Charleston, I certainly know very well. My family tried to visit at least once a year, given just a relaxing atmosphere. I know that you are getting many Northerners visiting Charleston, and then probably purchasing a property to actually reside in Charleston. So it's a fast-growing area. So thank you for having me. And just following my instruction, I think I'm given about 20 minutes to give you my assessment of how you can anticipate the market developments. And as an economist, I speak better with PowerPoint. So let me upload that onto the screen. So bear with me just 1 second here. Okay, so we have that. All right, so if we recall back towards mid-March, and I distinctively remember the time when everything went to a lockdown, because I was anticipating or looking forward to the March Madness, the basketball tournament, but it did not occur because of the lockdown. And the first couple of weeks of the lockdown, we were truly scared. We were scared on two fronts. First, the virus. How dangerous is it? If someone sneezes in front of us, does that mean that it's a death sentence? You know, we were unaware of what social distancing really meant. So there was a tremendous amount of scare at that time. And the second front was the business income. With the lockdown, no one can transaction on homes. So what happens to our income? We have a mortgage payment coming up soon. Does that mean that foreclosure situation, prices plunging? And just personal, you know, many people, realtors, were concerned about their own status of, well, you know, are they going to go into a foreclosure? But now we are in the last days of June, and what are we feeling? First, we are much more relaxed. Second, I know that businesses have been disrupted, but for the first time ever, NAR have been advocating for a unemployment insurance benefit for realtor members, or I should say independent contractors. So at least there is some income support during this disruption. Third, stimulus package, things like the mortgage forbearance is buying us time until the economy recovers. And the massive stimulus bills for brokerages tapping into small business administration loans. Sometimes those loans, I should say many times, does not have to be repaid if you meet certain criteria. So massive stimulus package into the economy. So completely different sort of personal assessment of what happened at the mid-March versus what's happening today. So let me go over some numbers and then give you my perspective as to what you can anticipate for the remainder of the year and going into 2021. The broadest measurement of the economy is something called GDP, and you will hear politicians constantly mention it. I'm sure President Trump will mention, Joe Biden will be mentioning about what the GDP status is. And it fell 5% in the first quarter. Second quarter number is not yet in, but it should be worse than the first quarter. But this is a government-imposed lockdown. Government said you have to stay home. You cannot do businesses. So it contracted, led by consumer and business spending going down. Interestingly, the residential investment line that you see, even with the mid-March shutdown, it actually grew in the first quarter by whopping 18%, very solid increase. Home building activity, home sales, spending for remodeling activity, all increasing, just to show you how strong the housing market had been prior to the pandemic. So the housing market was really running very, very strong before the pandemic. The final two line is after the first quarter, month of April, income increased by 12%. And you say, how in the world is it possible income to rise when people have lost jobs, they don't have wages, the entrepreneurial income is not coming in? But as I alluded to, massive stimulus package that has provided support for the income as a whole. But with the baseball season not on, you could not go to the restaurant in the first month. what did people do? They could not spend the money, so they saved up that money. Savings rate increased to 33%. Normally, people would only save 8% of their income. So savings increased greatly. What it means is that as the economy steadily reopens, I know many areas, including South Carolina. My parents still live in South Carolina, Columbia, the mid part of the country, mid part of the state. But there's no place to spend money, so people are saving up. But as the economy goes into phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, there will be opportunity to spend money, but hopefully people can follow social distancing to contain the virus. But there is a clearly large potential spending power that can go into the economy. Now, if we look at the job market, which is quite ugly, the 20 million job losses in the month of April, a single month, most of the jobs were related to the leisure and hospitality. Again, hotel industry, completely, massive layoffs in the hotel industry. Disney World was shut down, so they have to lay off their workers. Airline industry running at only 80% vacancy passenger rate currently. So large job cuts. But other industries, I would say it's only a temporary job cuts that will come around very, very quickly. For example, the second line, did you know that during the pandemic crisis, I guess we are still in it, there are job cuts for nurses and doctors. And we see the television images of those heroic workers. I mean, you want to applaud them as they're walking along the street because they are going into danger, going to the hospital, trying to cure people, just like the 9/11 firefighters. They went into the building when the danger was present. I mean, we want to, congratulate everything. But during this crisis, nurses were laid off. And you say, how in the world is that possible? Well, many nurses who are not directly involved with COVID-19, say hip replacement surgery, or dental offices. Dental offices essentially, had to shut down and lay off all their workers. So these occupations, there was a job losses, but because of the government shutdown. But now as the economies are steadily reopening, dental offices are busy, hip replacement, which had been postponed, need to take place. So these jobs will be coming around. Other job that needs to come around quickly is construction. I know in Charleston, I hear frequently, inventory shortage, not enough inventory. Many newcomers are coming into Charleston, great place to live, but not enough place to purchase home. So we need to build more home, meaning that construction jobs will be turning positive very, very soon. Retail sector may take a little longer, but the warehousing industry is booming. Amazon is hiring people. So large job cuts, but good portion should be steadily coming back with the reopening of the economy. This is the total job number from the year 2000 to current. So you see from year 2000 to the middle of the chart, which in hindsight, clear vision, it was an artificial job creation. It was led by subprime lending and people overstretched their budget. There was some euphoria going on about the real estate market before the foreclosure crisis because subprime lending, funny mortgages, overstretched people's budget. It was unsustainable. So we had the foreclosure crisis in the middle of this chart, the Great Recession. But from the low point to right before the pandemic, 10 straight years of job creation, the longest economic expansion ever for the country. We had Senator Tim Scott from Charleston speak at NAR event recently, and he was mentioning, right before the pandemic, we had the lowest unemployment rate in the country across all demographic groups, whether for females, whether African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans, just across the board, we had the lowest unemployment unemployment rate condition for the country. Then in a single month of April, boom, 10 years of job creation loss, you see on the chart. But with the reopening in the economy, good portion of those jobs will steadily reappear later months of this year. And again, social distancing, let's not have a breakout of the coronavirus, and the job creation can continue. Look at this US chart, just embed this into your mind because next chart will be for Charleston and compare. So one thing to note on the Charleston market is that the downturn that occurred in the middle of the this graph is much milder compared to the rest of the country, showing the resiliency of the Charleston market. And then you continue to boom. And even with the April job cuts, you are well ahead of what it was in 2009 or even in the year 2000. Let me go back to the US chart for a second. So the US job losses occurred in April and is back down to the low point in 2009 and in the year 2000. But in Charleston is doing much better, just to show you how many new residents are moving into the city. I mean, this is the greater Charleston metro market, going all the way to Somerville, Edisto, the Kiawah Islands part. So you see that greater Charleston market is doing much, much better than the rest of the country. And this trend should continue as the economy steadily reopens or going into next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. That is the overall trend. The unemployment insurance condition looks like the following. So mid-March, before mid-March, small blip, essentially non-significant. Then the mid-March lockdown, number of people who are getting laid off and filing for the unemployment insurance for the very first time in the US shot up. Good news on this is that with each passing weeks is fewer and fewer people. The cumulative number of people who have been laid off and filing for the unemployment insurance for the very first time is 45 million. And this is where I think the media gets it wrong, or at least they report it factually correct but misleading. And why do I say that? Because yes, it is factually true. 45 million or 46 million people have been laid off and they have filed for unemployment insurance. But if you look at how many people are actually receiving unemployment insurance in the latest week, it is not 45 million, it's only 21 million. So what has happened? What this tells you is that someone who used to work at Macy's department store got laid off, receiving unemployment check for 1, 2, 3 weeks, and then suddenly found a job at Amazon, delivering goods, or at local grocery store, or at the drug pharmacy. So there are job creation that is happening even as there was fresh layoffs. So media will only pound on those 45 million job losses, not about the job creation that's going on at Amazon and other sectors of the economy, because total number of people receiving unemployment check today is much lower than people who initially filed for the unemployment insurance. Now, here, or I should say the map here, let me make it easy and let's pinpoint towards the state of Texas. And in Texas, you see $165. First, it's easy to identify as the largest state in the continental US. So what does that $165 mean? Well, what it means is that someone who got laid off in Texas is now receiving unemployment check. The unemployment check is extra generous because of the stimulus package. So on average, someone who is laid off in the state of Texas is receiving $165 more each week in unemployment check than the wages they were receiving. If you look at South Carolina, is $61 in parentheses, which means they are a little bit shy of the wages they were receiving on average. Some people in Charleston may be better off, other people worse off, but on average, South Carolinians are $61 short each week compared to the wages they were receiving. So you see by state variation. But at least it is about roughly 90% of the income replacement. So it's not a disaster. People are getting financial support. So even during this high unemployment situation, people can tap into it. And realtors, I know realtors love commission checks, and rightly, they're energetic, entrepreneurial. But this business disruption was not the fault of realtors. So please tap into the resources until the economy is fully back on strength. I know the housing market is showing strength now, but once the resources are provided by the government, please tap into it because we advocated, NAR advocated, and explained to members of Congress, including Senator Tim Scott, to say the independent contractors should be included in the overall unemployment benefits. Now, the monetary policy in the meantime is all in, most accommodated, high liquidity. Federal funds rate, the chart that you see, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, but all this impact is the following. lowest mortgage rates ever. The blue line is the mortgage rates, and we are at the lowest average rate ever, 3.1%. Orange line moves similarly to blue line. So what is that orange line? Orange line is a 10-year treasury yield. So if the government has to borrow money, what are they paying? So two lines move very similarly, but look at the last data point. You see the last data point shows that orange line, 10-year treasury is less than 1%, which means that mortgage rate should be under 3%. So current average is 3.1% mortgage rates. And you said, oh, I like this. But it is possible that it may go down even lower to possibly 2.8%, 2.9% in few weeks. Possibility, not a guarantee, because 10-year treasury could go up, but there is a little room to go down. But there is one mortgage which is not working, that's jumbo mortgages, because Fannie and Freddie cannot purchase jumbo mortgages by law. Ordinary consumers, they have no idea what Fannie and Freddie does, but for local mortgage brokers, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, when they originate those mortgages, they are making those loans knowing they can sell to Fannie and Freddie. If they knew they cannot sell to Fannie and Freddie, they would be much more hesitant. And jumbo market, they cannot sell to Fannie and Freddie. So you have to come up with like 20%, 30%, or in some cases, 40% down payment to get a jumbo mortgage. It's very, very difficult on the jumbo. Hence, the upper end market could be somewhat softer, while the affordable price points, mid-price point could be very strong given the record low mortgage rates. Now, inventory is short. And one of the questions that I got from the media in the early weeks was, should we anticipate foreclosures and massive price declines as what happened 10 years ago? And I shared this chart with the reporters to say, we are fundamentally different. Back in 2007 period, we had oversupply of inventory. Furthermore, home builders were going wild. They were producing left and right. But what has been happening in recent years is that home builders are much more restrained. They have been underproducing, and that is the cumulative impact of underproduction, and that's why we have inventory shortage. And this inventory shortage means we will not have price declines. Now, some of the people who have lost job, and once the mortgage forbearance period ends, you may see some trickling of the foreclosures, but it will not linger in the marketplace for long. There are buyers wanting to buy. It is a terrible news for anyone who's going through the foreclosure, but it's not going to be the case like 10 years ago, foreclosure inventory lingering in the market for a long period. There are ready buyers to buy those property, whether investors wanting to make quick repairs and sell it at a profit, or first-time buyers who are ready to get into the market. So completely different picture today versus 10, 12 years ago when we did have that foreclosure crisis. The evidence of the economic lockdown is showing up in pending contracts. So everything was moving nicely up to February before the lockdown, and our pending contracts went down. But month of May, as the economies opened in many states across the country, began rising. If you remember Georgia, our neighboring state in Georgia was the first state to reopen. A lot of controversy. Does it mean the spread of the virus? What's going to happen? And what we saw in Georgia, at least economically, is the following. When Georgia opened their economy, listings were immediately popping out. And those listings were quickly being grabbed by the buyers. Days on the market, 7 days on the market. Sometimes if it goes up to 30 days on the market, it's considered long because there are so many buyers wanting to take advantage of the record low mortgage rates. And rest of the country is now seeing that. So in the month of May, we saw a sharp turnaround in pending contracts with a reopening of the economies in most states. But it is a hair shy of what it was last year. But it's possible that it may surpass last year's figures in the later part of this year. Now, sales closings always lags pending by a month, so we should anticipate the closing activity, commission checks to begin popping out from, say, June, July onward as pending contracts have been increasing. Another very positive indicator is this. This is mortgage applications. As a realtor, you always tell your clients, be serious, get the mortgage approval, apply for mortgages. So how many people are applying for mortgages to buy a home? This does not include refinances. So no refinances in this chart, just to buy a home. You see that before the pandemic, it was running about 10% higher compared to 1 year before. And during the pandemic, it went down 35%. Now, recent weeks, it is 20% higher compared to June of last year. So if you thought June of last year was a good, decent activity, well, this is implying that June of this year is even more activity, 20% higher. So there are clearly buyers coming up. And if you look at this chart, it looks like a shape of the letter V, V-shaped recovery. I cannot say if the economy will be in a V-shaped recovery, but the housing market is clearly in a V-shaped recovery. Now, commercial real estate is going to take some time, especially the retail sector, office sector. Warehousing is very strong, but commercial real estate may take longer to recover. But residential home sales market, it looks to be a V-shaped recovery. And are we going to have any inventory relief in the second half of the year? And my answer is unfortunately not. Because we will have more listings popping out, but it will not stay on the market for long. Because only way to get a balanced market is we have to have home builders consistently build more empty homes. Building more empty homes means some trade-up buyers buy those new homes and release their existing home onto the market. But what did the builders do during the pandemic? They retrenched, they produce even less, which means that housing shortage that we had before the pandemic will be with us later part of this year. And only in 2021, maybe we see some sign of normalcy, but it's not going to be the normalcy in the later part of 2020. Inventory shortage, if you're working with the buyers, make them prepared. There could be multiple offers. And if you're sellers, there will be multiple offers if you price it right, do the right comps, look at the potential appraisals. But if you price it too high, you can become stale very quickly. But just giving you some ideas about, that is overall still a seller's market, but they still need to price it correctly. One big bad news is the federal budget deficit, massive. But it was needed because we needed that stimulus package. So who is buying this massive federal debt? Is it the Chinese government? No. Is it the South Carolina Teachers Retirement Fund? No. Who is buying this massive debt? In Washington, D.C., there's the White House, there's the Congress, and then there's the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is completely independent. And also from economic perspective, there's something called Federal Reserve, which is independent. So President Trump can, shout, yell at the Federal Reserve, but they will act on their own. So who is buying this debt? Is the Federal Reserve who is purchasing this debt. Where is the Federal Reserve getting the money? They're printing money. In short, you can almost say that unemployment checks are printed money. And you say something does not sound right. Printed money, how can we get away with this? Well, answer is many, many years of US credibility. $20 bill. Take that $20 bill to Mexico, take it to South Korea, take it to Italy. Show that $20 bill and say, give me a haircut. And they will gladly give you a haircut for that $20 bill. Everybody accepts the US dollar. So America is fortunate to have that credibility where you can print money, and not have inflation right away. So no inflation this year, no inflation next year. But down the road, 6, 7 years from now, we may have a little higher inflation. Higher inflation means what? Real estate value, which is a good hedge against inflation, will be rising. So anyone with real estate, they will be enjoying higher prices. Rents will be rising. Food prices will be rising. Social Security check will be rising, even though their standard of living is not rising. Everything will be rising except for one major category, is that monthly mortgage payment. Anyone who is buying home this year or next year when the mortgage rate are at this low level, lock in those low monthly payments. Independent of inflation, your monthly payment is completely fixed. Something that you may want to share with your clients. that this may be one of the rare golden opportunity to lock in at record low mortgage rates, monthly payment completely fixed, even if there was to be inflation in future years. So very possible good opportune time. So let me wrap it up with an outlook. So the outlook is last year we had a respectable year. First quarter sales were running about 5% higher. I think Charleston numbers are generally a little better than the national. In the second and third quarter, I thought it would be down, but mortgage application numbers are indicating second half we may actually be positive above last year. Let's hope the mortgage application data is actually better information than my computer modeling that I have. So for the annual, in the middle column, 2020, we will have negative GDP, overall job losses this year. Home prices rising, no decline in home prices, but sales may be down about 10%. But 2021, everything lights up positively. Positive GDP, jobs, home prices, home sales. Charleston should be outpacing rest of the country. So home prices in Charleston, maybe 5% growth. Home sales, maybe 20% growth. So whatever that is missed out on this spring buying season will easily be made up in 2021. One final, absolutely last chart. Even if the vaccine is discovered, I think there is one permanent change. I'm doing the Zoom meeting. I didn't even know what a Zoom was before the pandemic. We are doing a lot of virtual office meeting. And many offices, like for example, Twitter has announced to their employees, you can work from home forever. Facebook has announced to their employees much more flexibility, and you will see more office jobs giving that opportunity. And if that is the case, you say, why do I need to live so close to New York City? Why do I need to live so close to Washington, D.C.? Maybe I could live in Charleston, and I know in Charleston they have direct flights to D.C. and New York. So knowing that they have to be in office maybe only twice a month, maybe why not just enjoy larger size house in a more pleasant environment rather than living directly near the job centers. So you may get a secondary boost in housing demand in the future because of this permanent change of not needing to be in downtown of major cities. And Charleston, I think, is in a position to benefit from this development. So thank you very much, and thanks for listening. And I will now turn it back to Michael. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. We know you've got a busy schedule, so I know you'll be dropping off, but thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Enjoy your day, everyone.
Thanks. I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did. I want to follow up on what I see are 4 key takeaway points that really position us for what we need to look at and focus on for the rest of this year and moving forward. Because I very much liked some of his predictions. I have my fingers crossed that all of the ones for 2021 come true and that we see growth in that area. But of course, we've already talked about some of the inventory challenges. So absent inventory, it's going to be hard to see growth in those sorts of numbers. The 4 key areas that I really wanted to address based on Dr. Young's presentation, and if you didn't obviously pick up on that, I was going to ask him in the front in case you didn't know. When his family moved from South Korea, he was in elementary school, and they actually moved to the Fort Jackson area of Columbia. So he's actually a South Carolinian as much as he can be, and that probably helped with him willing to jump on our call as well. But let's look at those 4 key areas. The first is what I'm going to refer to as our first challenge, is probably what I refer to as the sudden jolt. When the roller coaster stops at the end of the ride and it kind of ticks forward, and then all of a sudden it jolts you forward, and it's kind of a bit jarring. I do think we're going to see one of those in the next 30 to 45 days. Again, remember the unemployment assistance, the additional $600 provided by the federal government ends the end of July. So absent that being extended, and I'm not sure whether there is or isn't appetite for that right now in Congress and the amount of costs that that brings along with it, absent that, that's additional $600 per week is going to drop off at the end of July for those receiving state unemployment benefits. So if the average unemployed worker in South Carolina was already $61, making $61 less than they made before on a weekly basis, that's going to jump to $661. Additionally, the PPP, Payroll Protection Program, was designed to run for an 8-week period that ended the end of June. And again, those loans were partially or completely forgivable if the employer spent a certain portion of those on payroll and didn't reduce their workforce by more than a certain amount. You also see other government actions, like some of the government injections of cash into the airline industry. That first injection of cash required the airline industry to keep their payrolls intact through, I believe, September. So in the next 30 to 45 days, as some of these programs come to an end, both with additional dollars in the pockets of those unemployed, the ending of PPP, the ending of some of these other programs, and basically a realization as we see more businesses closing that either couldn't hold on, or restaurants that thought they'd be back to full capacity and are not, and we see more closures, I think we will see kind of that sudden jolt with an additional burst of unemployment and some challenges that we see in the marketplace. So that initial jolt is one of the issues that I think we have to look out for. The second issue that's a positive and that we need to do a good job educating our clients on is pricing. I've gotten multiple conversations of people saying, you know, great, where can I go get that great house that's on sale because of COVID? Or, you know, how much do you think pricing is going to come down? I was listening to an old interview of Dr. Jones yesterday, and he was talking about people outside the real estate space who decided they wanted to chime in on real estate. And I think back in May, Mark Cuban was giving a podcast saying, well, if I had a house under contract, I'd just tell them, you know, we're taking, 30% off the price, or, some crazy number on those things. We've got to make sure we educate our clients, because we don't expect to see much negative impact at all on pricing. And again, we've got to be able to back that up and tell someone why. So if you're working with a home buyer, they need to understand that, we're not now in a buyer's market. This is not 2009. We don't have record inventory and sales just fell off a cliff. What we've got is high demand and record low inventory. And therefore houses are selling with multiple offers. Houses are selling, well-priced houses are selling with multiple offers. Houses are selling at or above list price. And buyers who aren't ready for that and who think all of a sudden they're going to get a big discount are going to miss the boat. And we need to make sure we educate them. It's also important to understand the differences, as I talked about, not only in supply and demand from 2009 to today, but also in, hopefully, which was an example of the government actually learning from the past, and these forbearance programs that allowed people to put their home loan in forbearance and have that balance added to the end of the loan, so there's not a balloon payment due at the end of that forbearance, is going to prevent a huge amount of foreclosures or other distressed sales. On top of that, unlike 2009, we've got record amounts of home equity. So even those people that unfortunately lose their jobs and need to sell, they've got the home equity and they can exit those houses in an orderly fashion with your help, as opposed to the massive foreclosures and dumping of properties that we saw in 2009 that led to a downward spiral in prices. So we think prices are certainly going to be insulated and continue to move up. So that's a positive. The next positive is prior to 2009, the United States had never seen a national decline in home sale prices. And when I say that, I'm talking about a decline in home prices across the entire country. It just didn't exist. And until the banking crisis and the mortgage crisis and the fact that all those mortgages got chopped up and sold so many different places, and the economic challenge that we had in 2009, that was actually the first time we saw a wholesale decline in real estate prices across the entire country. Prior to that, real estate was like the weather. It's very local, and it can be hyper local. It can be raining in Somerville and sunny at the beach, or vice versa. And so we've got to make sure that our clients understand that real estate's local, because you will start to see headline grabbing or attention grabbing headlines, especially in some of the bigger markets. So in New York, you're going to see very substantial price declines, 10 or 20%. You know, you might see that in California when Dr. Young talks about the jumbo markets not working, you know, and the jumbo market is coming back, by the way. You know, your Carolina One mortgage loan officers have multiple new jumbo products which have returned to the market, but were gone for a considerable period of time. But in California, you know, if you're watching $1 Million Listing on Wednesday night, once they start filming again, my guess is they're going to be talking about declining prices, not multiple offers on $20 million houses. You know, it's just kind of a different world. But right now, with international travel at a standstill, with other issues going on, there are going to be some bigger cities, especially densely packed bigger cities like New York and Miami and Los Angeles and Chicago, that will probably have a lot more pricing impacts on pricing and downward pressure on pricing than will Charleston. Again, we were ahead of the national economy prior to this. If you looked at that little chart, not only did our job drop off get to be lower during the pandemic, but it also showed the dramatic growth we've had in overall jobs since the last boom in 2005 to 2008, and how much bigger our economy has gotten. And that's another reason why we're setting some of these record numbers for pending sales. So as Charleston continues to grow, as Volvo continues to roll cars off the line, you know, the other day they had the 5 millionth car that was made in Greenville from BMW shipped out of the Charleston port, or come off the line. I'm not sure which one the article was talking about. However, just imagine what Charleston's going to look like, you know, when Volvo is rolling off numbers like that, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future. And so locally, we are still a very attractive area. We're actually right in that sweet spot of a major market, major mid-sized market, but not, you know, some of the large cities that people might have some recent challenges with in the density. We've already had lots of anecdotal stories about agents of people moving from the Northeast and other places down to Charleston, and we really have a lot to offer. So I think, you know, it's important on a local level, not only the greater Charleston market, but also submarkets inside Charleston, also down to the neighborhood level, that you educate the clients and make sure they understand your expertise and your market knowledge is a lot of what they're paying for. You know, they need you as much now, especially in a low inventory market. You know, the risk of underselling a house or pricing it based on comps that closed 3 months ago is huge. And so we need to make sure we demonstrate that value, that it's not just bringing them a contract, it's pricing it correctly, it's positioning so that it sells quickly, so that it doesn't end up stale sitting on the market, and that the client's goal is achieved based on that. And we've had lots of recent experiences and people I've talked to that you know, are giving those clients the advice those clients are paying for. It really is where agents can show their value. The last on the good news side, again, it's one of those good news, bad news things, is all of this trillions and trillions of spending, which is necessary given the unprecedented nature of the pandemic and the shutdown, will result eventually, most likely, in long-term inflation. And we're going to see at some point, it just seems to make sense that we really have to inflation. And the simple answer for a client renting or a client thinking about buying, and Dr. Young did a great job of covering this, and I'm really glad he did, is inflation means everything gets more expensive. You know, the Happy Meal gets more expensive, the movie ticket gets more expensive, and your rent gets more expensive. And while salaries hopefully go up as well, and that, you know, help offset some of that as you have higher inflation, that's not necessarily always the case. But as Dr. Young said, what doesn't go up is the 30-year fixed mortgage. That payment's the same today as it is 10 years and 20 years from now. And that's really one of the things that sometimes we miss, is it's not only the appreciation of the underlying home, which you can get into with 0 to 3 to 10% to 20% down. and you get the benefits of the appreciation of the entire value of that home. So if you buy a $300,000 home and it goes up 3%, you've just gained $9,000 in net worth. But it's also the portion of your salary that goes towards housing. And that number has jumped exponentially for non-homeowners as rents continue to go up year after year after year. And it's such a bigger share of your paycheck is necessary for housing. And owning a home is a huge hedge against inflation. And it's always been that way. But that was before we ended up with $4 trillion of spending in a 90-day window. So that's something that's going to exist even more so. So again, lots of key takeaway points that we can use to communicate with our clients on an ongoing basis. And that's one of our goals to always provide you all with. You know, Dave's providing market updates on a weekly basis. I sent out the Visimail articles that will be in your newsletters if you're part of Visimail, you know, last week as well. You can cut and paste that language and use that to send stuff out to your clients so they understand value that you're bringing to the table. So I know it was a deep economic type meeting, but I appreciate everybody being here. I want to get a quick plug in on July 14, 2 weeks from today. We're going to have a conversation that's a lot different than today. So today was a lot of numbers and a lot of charts and a lot of economics. 2 weeks from today, we're going to be joined by Eddie Moreton, who's a personal friend of mine and Patty. And he is the CEO of Lift Orlando, which is a nonprofit organization founded in 2013 by a group of businesses and a group of business leaders who partnered with residents in underprivileged and underserved areas of Orlando to kind of break a cycle of poverty through neighborhood revitalization. And I thought both a lot of what was going on in society as well as the connection to real estate was really something that would lead to a timely and appropriate and very enjoyable conversation. Eddie is, to me, one of the best speakers that I've ever heard. And has a great way to connect and communicate with people. And what I thought we'd be able to do in 2 weeks is hear from Eddie, both about what they're trying to do in Orlando, the successes they've had, but also how they've achieved those. And then maybe lessons we can take away from that, and also make sure that I leave time for Q&A with that as well. So it'll be a different philosophical type meeting, but you know, our goal is to have these every 2 weeks so that we can cover the relevant topics, not just in what's going on in our marketplace or how we sell more houses, but also in what's going on in our greater community and our greater society, and how we as a company and we as a community not only improve, but also use our position, our knowledge to help others that are out there. Last thing I'll say is hopefully everybody's educated yourselves on the Palmetto Heroes program. With the down payment assistance. Remember, that money is only there till it runs out. Your Carolina One loan officer is qualified to do those programs, but that can provide people with down payment assistance of at least $10,000, which can really make the difference of someone being able to purchase a home. And we owe it to them to educate ourselves and make sure that they're aware of those resources that are out there, and that we can help, if it's right for them and if it meets their goals, bring the joy and value and benefits of homeownership to, you know, as many people as we can. So with that, I appreciate all the kind words and thoughts. Andrea said it would be nice to have some printed bullet points from the talk. So yeah, we can put some talking points together. The calls are recorded. They're available on C1 Rose, but we can definitely put some talking points together that you guys can use with your clients, turn into some posts and things like that, that will be beneficial, so I can work on those as well. Thank you for being here. I hope everybody has a great week. It's 11:01, so we always want to stop on time. And I hope to see everybody soon. Bye.